All the stars have come in close just to see you, I suppose, and they're a-gleaming. You must be dreaming, and the sun has said goodbye with a twinkle in his eye. He's left the ocean with sweet emotion. We go dancing in the rain.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 35 of Little Big Knits. This is a podcast primarily about knitting, and my name is Selma. I'm coming to you from here in Ottawa, Canada, where I live with my family and our cat Yoda. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Selma Knits. And on Ravelry, we have a group called Little Big Knits, where you can find the show notes and any of the knit-alongs that we happen to be hosting at the moment. So welcome today. If you're new, thank you for checking me out. And if you are returning, hello again. Today I am podcasting on a beautiful day. We are going through some rather strange times, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the later segments of the podcast. I do want to focus on the knitting and the regular stuff that we usually do at the beginning part of the podcast. So one thing I wanted to mention was I had shown you some yarn that my friend Shella had dyed and given me a mini that had been inspired by my father's house, and I just wanted to thank you all who made comments about that with your inspiring ideas of what to do with that yarn. There were all kinds of lovely ideas of knitting a square and putting it together with a picture of my father's house, for example, or a lot of ideas about knitting it up in some way or framing it, and so I haven't decided what I'm going to do with it yet. I'm just holding tight and looking at it every once in a while, but I really wanted to thank you all for your comments. It was really very much appreciated. Also, before we go on, the music at the beginning of the podcast, there were so many comments about that last time. It seems to be one of those tunes that you just keep on whistling through the rest of the day. And so I've decided that it's a keeper for a little while because it makes me happy as well. So you heard it again today with more wintry scenes, because that just seems to be a lot of what's going on around here these days. And yeah. And in other news, before we get into the knitting, we have a couple of knit-alongs going on that are being hosted in the group on Ravelry. And one of them is the Garment Galore Cal, Garment Galore Cal 2020. And you can use the hashtag on Instagram, and there is a chatter thread as well as a finished objects thread, and people are just finishing up their sweaters, boy oh boy. You can join in with works in progress if you like, or anything that you've started finished in the new year. And so there's lots of inspiration in there already. I think they're about, in the last, I announced it last podcast, which was about 5 weeks ago, and there are already about 80 projects in there, I think. And so that is a knit-along that I've hosted in the past that is for garments and adult garments. So anything that is a sweater, cardigan, skirt, shorts, vest, dress, jacket, anything of that nature that is essentially a piece of clothing, not an accessory. You are welcome to post them there. You can post for each garment that you finish. You can put in a separate post. Some people have been putting them together, but you can do them separately, and that just actually gives you more entries and potential entries for prizes at the end of the year when I'll do them. There's been a lot of chatter as well, although I'm going to say that people have been a little bit more quiet in this last week. I think we've all found ourselves in a little bit of a state of shock and adaptation and perhaps dealing with health issues. So there's been a little bit less chatter in there, but people are still posting their finished objects. I hope you're finding plenty of time to knit. The other knit along that we have is called the It's About Time knit along. And by the way, any of these include crochet as well. Okay, I just call them knit alongs, but they really do include crochet too. And It's About Time is about using up yarns or patterns that have been sitting around in our lives for more than a year. So if you've had yarn that you bought at a festival 3 years ago that still hasn't been used up, or a pattern that you got excited about 2 years ago and it's just sat there and you haven't done anything with it, then that's exactly what this knit along is for. I've been thinking actually about all the books I have. I have so many knitting books that I rarely knit from. So that's another thing. If you have an old magazine or old book, that would count as well. And you know, it's about time that I finally use up that yarn or that pattern, and that's the nature of that knit along. And so feel free to come into the group and join in on those. And Gertie wanted to come and say hello today. You know, I love this chicken mug. I don't know. This is the anthropomorphization at its best. I've given my chicken mug a name, and when Alejandro makes tea in the evenings, he'll just naturally grab, not always, but often he'll say, here, have some tea with Gertie tonight. And I am drinking this sea buckthorn tea that I got in Finland almost a year and a half ago when I went with my mum. It's called Turnite, and it's a green tea with sea buckthorn in it, and I absolutely love it, and it's coming to an end, and I have to figure out how to get some more. I haven't looked online. This company is called Ripisen, and I'm hoping that they sell online, and I might just order some from them and hopefully get it eventually, because I really like it. It's got a lovely, lovely flavor. So let's get on with the knitting. I'm wearing one and I'm realizing that I'm actually quite warm in this. This you didn't even see last time. It came into being and was born since the last podcast. So what happened was that when I left my previous job, I was given a gift certificate for Wabi Sabi, which is my local yarn shop. And so I went in a couple of times trying to figure out what am I going to spend this on. And then I decided that I wanted to make the FELIX sweater, which is what this is. And so I think it might have actually been the afternoon or the day after my last podcast or soon thereafter, I went into Wabi Sabi and I said, okay, I want to make the FELIX, and I chose 4 different yarns that I thought I might like to use. So one was a light blue, one was a purple, one was this sort of olive green mustard, and one was a really nice indigo blue. And I soon discounted the light blue and the purple. Although I have knit a lot of purple things in the past, I seem to not be in a purple phase right now. And I was really drawn to the Lopi, which was a blue, which was not exactly the color that somebody had knitted in that I met at the Ullen retreat, but I'd been really inspired by her sweater, and that's where I got the idea to knit this. But I really liked the blue, and I really liked this ochre, and I ended up going with this as something a little different in my wardrobe. So I bought the yarn. I knit the sweater in about 9 days. It was like the fastest knit I think I've ever had as far as a garment goes, and actually had a ball left and took it back to the store and got a credit. I don't think I've ever done that before. I've always ended up with a stray ball here and there when I finished a project, because most of the time when I buy yarn, I don't start the sweater immediately, but with this one I just did, and it just was such a fast knit, and I have to say a very enjoyable knit, and I have to say a successful sweater. And I'm seriously thinking about going back and using that store credit to get the Lopi, or at least put it towards the Lopi and make a blue one, because I just really loved the blue, and I really enjoy the sweater. So I'm going to put down who designed it, because it's just gone completely out of my mind. But this is the FELIX sweater. She also designed the FELIX cardigan, and I decided to go with a sweater. It is a top-down raglan sweater, and the raglan increases are created with this lace pattern here. It's got some really effective short row shaping, which creates a slightly scooped neckline here. So the short row shaping is what does that. It's not really so much about creating you know, more length in the back as it is about the shaping. And that was really effective. And it's just, after that, it's a simple sweater that goes just like this, and you know, with long sleeves. My shirt from underneath is bulking a little bit, but it's just, I decided to make it slightly cropped. I'm really enjoying that look these days. I never thought I would have, but now my older sweaters, which are longer, I feel like this is just too long. So I've really gotten used to this this cropped look, and I've been wearing it a lot. I have to say, I've really enjoyed it. So the yarn is Wild Wool by ERIKA Knight, which is a wool nettle blend. Here's the label for you to see. And this is a 85% wool and 15 nettle viscose. And so it does feel like it's got a linen in it. And every once in a while there are slight discolorations, which you don't see a lot of, but every once in a while there are these little things. I'm not quite sure how I feel about them, but it is a very rustic feeling wool. At the same time, there's another one. At the same time, very, very silky smooth. It's a single ply, so I can see that there's pilling happening already. But I really enjoyed working with this, and I will be curious to see how it wears. If it wears really terribly, that's another reason to go and get the Blue Lopi, isn't it? Anyway, really, really like this, and it's just an easy peasy sweater. I knitted on 6mm needles, I believe. So that's another reason that I went very quickly. This is an Aran weight yarn. So although I think you could use a worsted weight yarn, the gauge might be a bit loose with the larger needle, so you might want to adjust that and do a little bit of sweater math. But yeah, just really, really nice. It's very warm, and it's lovely. So there you go. That's finished object number 1. Finished object number 2 is another sweater. This one you've seen because I've been working on it for a while, and it is the TELJA by KATRIN SCHNEIDER. And I think what I'm going to do is have a teeny weeny little bit of a wardrobe change so that you can see what it looks like on. I think that'll make it easier. Ta-da! Here I am again. So I wanted to put it on for, well, to show you, because I think it makes more sense to show it on. I was also getting really warm in that other sweater. I think this one will be a little lighter. So this sweater I made out of KATIA silk tweed, which is also an Aran weight, although this was knit on a 4.5mm needles. And it is a yarn that I don't have the band here anymore, but it was a rather high percentage of silk. And then there was a bit of mohair and a bit of wool and a bit of acrylic. And it's got quite a lovely halo to it. And it's a very soft, extremely light and airy yarn. I have to say, they have only a little bit left at the wool store, but I did think that, why didn't I buy more of this? This is really beautiful. Really beautiful yarn, and I'm sure that I could find it online, so we'll see. Perhaps I'll decide to buy some online if I can find it. But KATIA is a Spanish company that produces a lot of different yarns, sometimes crazy combinations, and you know, with all kinds of bits and bobs in them, and a lot of different types of yarns. And they do tend to have sort of, you know, different, they change over their yarns very quickly is what I'm trying to say. That they don't have a line that stays around necessarily for a really long time. So I'm a little concerned that I might not be able to buy more of this, but if I don't, that's all right. I've already knit with it. I really loved it. if you happen to find it, I suggest you get some. And it produces a very, very light fabric. The silk is more of a nubby silk, a tweedy type silk, and it does have this tweed effect. And then the mohair just provides a beautiful halo to this yarn, and this sweater is as light as anything. So I've talked about the actual sweater in the past. I really enjoyed knitting it. It was really a lovely knit, and I think it fits nicely. Here we go. It's just nice and loose. It has a nice length, and the stitch pattern is actually beautifully visible, which I was a little concerned about. The one thing that I'm a little bit disappointed about and confused about more than anything is the neckline, because in the sweater the neckline is not this open, and I didn't want a neckline that was this open. And when I finished knitting the front, I thought this is rather wide, but I thought, oh, it's just going to come in, and it didn't come in that much. And I only really realized this when I had put the front and the back together and knit the sleeves, and I thought, okay, I'm not going to be pulling this back to fix this at this point. It's still perfectly wearable. It's, you know, it's got, it fits, it stays on, it fits nicely. It's not like it's coming off my shoulders or anything like that, but it is a little wider. I prefer the neckline on the FELIX, especially because my idea was to have something that I would wear with shirts underneath. That being said, I might make this again. Both the FELIX and this are sweaters that I think could be knit again. I have some yarn upstairs. Actually, I made a sweater that I had intended for Alejandro. It ended up too small for Alejandro. It's a little awkward looking on me. So I've been thinking about pulling it out, and then I thought, you know what, it's the perfect yarn for this, and I might end up having two of these, or I'll make something that sort of has the idea of this, of being a lovely woolly layering piece. So we'll see what ends up happening, but yeah, I'm very happy with this, and I think the yarn is going to hold up nicely. I think it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful yarn to wear. And the pattern was really well written. Both patterns were actually, both the FELIX and the RAUWERK trees. This is the RAUWERK trees. Don't know what I called it before, but this is the RAUWERK trees by KATRIN Schneider. I feel like I might be a little bit funny today, but we'll see. So, oh, I have one more finished object for you. I finished the Advent socks. This is yarn that was given to me by Patricia of Paradise Island around mid-December. So I didn't knit these as Advent socks, which is fine because I was working on my blanket, which is right here actually. And I finally finished these. I've been knitting on them here and there and really enjoying them. I used a slip stitch pattern called Kick in the Pants, which has you doing a slip stitch sort of thingamajiggy on the change of the stripes. And I used some red yarn that was given to me by my friend Sue from, I believe, Ginger Snap That, as the toes and the heels. I used a cut-in heel that I learned from Tracy of the Grocery Girls, Tracy Miller, when I test knit her Georgia sock pattern. And I really liked that as an afterthought heel. I liked the way it ended up on the sides. There's like, it's just really smooth. I liked the process more, and I've gotten used to doing the Kitchener stitch as well. I have to say, I think these ended up slightly big, but still perfectly wearable. They're a little big on here too, but when I put them on, they were perfectly comfortable and nothing too big that I would give them away. And I'm not going to do that because these are my Advent socks, so I'll be looking forward to wearing these in December, if not before. So, oh, and by the way, these are on Knit Blockers by Patricia of Knitography, P4Chen on Instagram, and she makes these beautiful, beautiful stitch sock blockers, and she makes stitch markers and all kinds of different little knitting accessories made out of beautiful birch wood. So those are the finished objects. I have been able to finish quite a few things. And actually, speaking of Tracy Miller's socks, the Georgia socks, I happen to be wearing them today. Now that the weather's a little bit warmer, I thought, I think it's time to pull out my little ankle socks that I made last summer. So I've got them on my feet, and I'm just inserting a little video here so you can see what they look like. They fit wonderfully well, and they're a real pleasure to wear. And I made the orangey pink yarn is, what yarn was that again? It was a yarn that has a little bit of cashmere, so I'm curious to see how it wears. I made another pair of socks with some cashmere in it, and I find them fluffing a lot. So I'm curious, I'm going to try and wear these a lot now that the weather's warmer to see how the cashmere wears on these. I'm just curious to see what happens with cashmere in sock yarn, because I had never made any socks with cashmere before. So I'll probably report back on that at some point. So what am I working on? That's a good question. I seem to have 4 works in progress to show you today. I'm going to start with one from last time, which was my improvised shawl, which I was carrying in this bag that I made a few years ago. And I was working on this, and then I thought, uh-oh, I feel like I need to rip back. And and it looks like I stopped mid-row. Well, I haven't pulled this out in the last few weeks because I've been indecisive about whether to pull back or not, but I've decided that I will. I'll try and show you what happened. It's that, so when I showed it to you last time, I think I was around here. I had just put on this lovely, lovely green that was in my cowl, and then I added this purple, and then I had this blue from Stranded Dye Works that I had used in the Coilaheen, and then I started adding on some of this purple that was left over from my exploration station, and partway through I did a row of increases, and it seems to have created a frill-like effect, which I don't want. And on the edge here, you won't see it, well, you do see it actually, it kind of goes out too quickly. So I'm feeling like I need to pull this back to here, do some increases here, and then another set of increases. I had told you last time that I was going to follow the pattern of the Coilaheen. Well, I just got kind of, I just wanted to do my own thing, and that's what happens sometimes when you do your own thing. You end up doing silly things. So I seem to have done something that I'm not too thrilled about. So I am probably going to pull it back to here, do the increases right away here so that it doesn't happen partway through. But I was thinking about doing half of the increases here and half of the increases at the end of that section. And then I think I'll be set. But I should probably study pie shawls a little bit more, or half pie shawls a little bit more, but I just seem to be going along, and I'm like, whatever happens with this one, it's fine. It's fun experimentation. I'm learning, okay, so why did that go wrong, and what should I do here? So I'll be pulling that out back to the blue section, and then doing that, and then I'll report back on that next time. Who knows where I'll be then. In the meantime, I can't remember at what stage this project was at, because I had knit part of the yoke and then realized that it wasn't the right size needle, that I was using a 4.5, and I wanted to go up to a 5, and I can't remember if I had started the yoke, but I did go up to a 5 and it worked really well. So this is a project that's being housed by this bag by Dolphina. I think she's like Dolphina13 on Instagram, and she makes great bags. And this is big, and this sweater is quite bulky, so it's starting to outgrow that bag, even though it's quite large. So I'm making the TELJA for a friend of mine, and we've been friends for a very long time, and she deserves a sweater, and she had talked about wanting a colorwork sweater. So I'm making the TELJA for her. I am using Peace Fleece in this, I think it's called Olive Roots colorway, and it is, oh my gosh, I don't know if you can see all the colors that are happening in that. There is like turquoise and orange and light blue and green. It's just stunning, stunning yarn, and this is the second time I've used Peace Fleece, and their yarns are just, they're just magical in terms of the colors that are in there. In fact, there's a little bit of Peace Fleece right here. This light blue is another Peace Fleece, and it's another one that has like flecks of purple and yellow and turquoise and all kinds of things happening. It's quite amazing. I'm trying to find, oh yeah, there's one where suddenly there's a little fleck of purple in it. So anyway, I am making the TELJA using the Peace Fleece here and the light blue here, and the other three are all Lopi colors. And so a cream, and then this rusty orange, and then a turquoise there. And using the 5mm needles was great. Now, if you've knit the TELJA, you'll know that I'm doing this backwards because this is supposed to be a bottom-up sweater. Well, actually, I've finished the body now, but I decided to knit this from the top down. And I have to say that there are a lot of details to this sweater, so that was, if you're a beginner colorwork sweater knitter, I would say don't do that with this one because there's a lot of details. It was a bit of a challenge, I have to say, and I found myself having to read and reread and really read forward or read backwards into the pattern to make sure that I understood what was going on. But I did get through the color work, and it's looking great. And my friend tried it on. When she tried it on, the sleeves were way too, well, I hadn't started the sleeves, but the hole for the sleeves were just looked like they were going to be too big. So I pulled back and I readjusted the proportions a bit because I thought it can be a bit looser in the body, but if the sleeves are too loose, it just ends up looking a bit frumpy. So she tried it on. The rest of it looked great, fits wonderfully. And I went along and finished the body. Now she hasn't had a chance to try it on, thanks to the new reality. We haven't been able to see each other. So I just decided that we had measured her. I just knitted about as long as we had, and I thought the worst thing that happens is that when she is able to try it on, that it'll be too long or too short, and I adjust. That's not a problem. And same with the sleeves. I thought I'm just going to go ahead and start the sleeves. I have to find out from her how long her arms are, and we decided not to do any of the color work at the bottom here for the body, but we haven't yet decided whether we're going to do color work on the sleeves. So that's a decision that we're going to have to make. And if that's the case, I'll also have to make sure that the stitch count is right because I ended up adjusting. I have to say, I think that I started doing that, I did that the first time with the Anchors sweater. You may recall when I was knitting that I had gotten to the end of the yoke and I knew that there weren't enough stitches, so I did some additional additions of some additional increases, sorry, and then I sort of adjusted, knowing that I wanted the arms to be a little tighter and the body to be loose. I adjusted the counts, and I thought, well, that's a really great thing to do. So I decided just to do the same thing here. You know, that was an easy thing to do, to adjust the arm and the body count. And I do find it really easy, especially with a top-down yoke construction, that if you get here and you realize that it's too big, or especially if it's too small, you can do another row of increases and then, you know, adjust the sleeve numbers and the body numbers to suit you. So there we go. This is such a joy to work on because the yarn is so amazing. I do find, though, that because it is more of a woolen spun yarn and it's a bit of a dense well, I wouldn't say it's dense, but it's got tooth to it that I really need metal needles. I tried to use these Prim ergonomic needles that I had talked about before, but it's just too much of a pull on the yarn, so it wasn't a very nice fit. So what's next? The next two things I had not cast on last time either. First one is in this buku bag. It's a bucket bag from Buku, and I just love it. And although the project itself is not very big, the project is being knit out of this Stephen West book that I took out of the library. It's still got my sticky on it because I picked it up. Library is now closed, so I think I'll be keeping this for a little while. They don't seem to be keeping track right now of when things need to be returned and so forth. But I am making the dotted rays, which is this shawl by Stephen West. I think I showed you guys last time, didn't I? That I was using that I had this very beautiful alpaca silk yarn from Hedgerow yarns, but in a color that I just didn't really feel was great for me. And I ended up getting some of this, what yarn is this again? SANDNES garn. I'll put it on the screen because I don't remember. Pink to put with it. And I have since started the dotted rays, which I am making on 5mm needles. And I got this idea directly from Melissa of Espace Tricot. When I saw hers, I thought, that is what I'm doing with that yarn. Perfect! So I have started the dotted rays, and it's turning out really beautifully, and that is a better pink for me. And I'm going to absolutely love this thing. I can't wait for it to be done. And it is such a neat construction. I wouldn't call it memorizable, but very logical. So even though I'm referring back to the pattern, it makes total sense, and I just need to refer occasionally to know exactly, to be 100% sure that I'm doing the right thing. But it's a really, really fun knit. And so because I am double stranding it, I'm using 5mm needles. Otherwise, I think he calls for a 4mm or something like that, with a single fingering yarn rather than a double, double stranded. And but this is just turning out really great. I haven't decided whether I'm going to make the small or the large size. I know that Melissa made the small size, and finds that big enough. So I figure, I kind of looked at the pattern. I think I can kind of make the decision as I go along. So I think that that's what I'll probably do. Once I've finished the small size, I'll see if I want to go a little bit more, and it'll also depend on where I'm at with the yarn that I have, because I've got 2 skeins of this, so which comes to about 800 yards, so I certainly can't knit beyond that. Otherwise, the yarn will probably end up in my shawl, my other shawl, my improvised shawl. Last time I showed you some yarn. You may recall it was my accidental purchase. It was this Durarum Ulysse in this beautiful blue color. I think I'm going through a bit of a blue phase. I seem to be attracted to blue things. Yeah, and I seem to be attracted to kind of this indigo-y kind of blue. So I decided to cast on the KARELIA immediately. And the KARELIA, I don't have a printed version of the pattern, but it has this unusual sort of color work on the yoke. It's not a stranded color work. It's an Estonian technique, apparently. And so I decided to start on it right away. But what do you think of that mess? Then it got to the color work, and I realized you have to make little packages of yarn for each section, which I did, and then I started doing the color work as described, and it just was getting messier and messier and messier. So, and then at the same time, I started having doubts about whether I had made the yarn thick enough, because I'm not using the yarn that they called for. I took some leftover yarn from my ranunculus actually, and the ranunculus yarn. So I started having doubts, excuse me, about that, about whether it should be thicker to have a better effect, or whether I should go on. And I also had second thoughts about my organization of this whole thing. So right now this has been kind of put to the side. I was very enthusiastic about it and then lost my enthusiasm. And by the way, just so you know, the flowers are going to be pink. So this is being put on hold for right now, and I will soon find the space, the mental space, to get back to this and solve my problems. So I saw that somebody used these little clips to hold their each little bit of yarn together, and I think I'll do that. But I also, even though I measured out what they called for in the pattern, I'm like, am I going to have enough yarn here? So I'm a little bit at a loss with this, and feel like I need to really take some time to examine this and decide what I want to do. I definitely want to make the sweater. I had wanted to make it for Knit City. Knit City got cancelled, so I felt a little bit less pressure to make this. Also, I got excited about the FELIX, and then I thought, well, I'll wear that at Knit City. I don't think I'll wear that at Knit City if it goes on in July, because that will be way too warm, but I will have knit something summer-like for that. So I started the yoke, and it was all going along beautifully, but then I got a little stuck. So I will take my big mess here, clean that up, make some decisions. I may pull back just to the beginning of the color work and add another strand of mohair to make it a little bit thicker for the gray, and take it from there. But the technique is really very neat, not really hard once you understand what it is that they are asking you to do. Although I find I'm not 100% sure about how. I think it looks all right, but it's so unusual that it's the kind of thing where you're stopping and starting and wondering, am I doing this right? But I think I am, and yeah, so I don't have a whole lot more to say about this. The yarn, the Durarem Ulysse, is, what a neat yarn. It's got a very bouncy. I think this is probably the bounciest yarn that I've ever used. It's springing, it's springy, it's just overall very bouncy. Very neat yarn, and so I'm really looking forward to this. But as the weather is warming up, I'm not, rushing to make this, but I will continue. This is not going to get frogged or get, put aside. Maybe it will until next fall, but I'm so in love with the sweater. It's such a beautiful sweater that I really, really want to make this. And I think I just need to fix things up with my little balls of yarn, which have turned into a complete disaster, and make decisions about this, whether I want this to have a little bit more substance to it. So for now, excuse me, all these little bits and bobs are falling all over the place. For now, this is being housed in this lovely bag that Kate of Hawthorne Cottage Craft had made for us when we went to the Ullin retreat, and I've also added a couple of pins that she had included in my advent calendar in December. So they are now on here. Yeah, I really love this bag. So it's in here until it outgrows it. Right now I'm at the first ball, so it's perfectly comfortable in here, but after a couple of balls I think it's going to end up in a bigger bag. So that is it for my works in progress. I do think that probably the next time I podcast, the TELJA will be finished, and perhaps the dotted rays as well. We'll see. What I'm planning to knit next, actually, is also in a bit of a messy state right now, but I've started swatching, is the rug sweater by JUNKO OKAMOTO. I believe her name is. And I'll put it down here, and just in case I got it wrong, if my memory doesn't serve me well. I had bought this yarn at Battenkill Fiber Mill in the Adirondacks. Where was that now? I can't remember exactly where it was. But I went to a retreat last spring there, around there, and we went to the Battenkill Fiber Mill, and I bought this amazing CORRIEDALE, which is, can you see that? It's quite tightly twisted. Yoda is in a bit of a state. She doesn't know what to do with herself. You don't know what to do with yourself? Do you want to come up here? Do you want to come say hi? You're just going to stare at me instead. Anyway, so I had gotten this yarn, which is a CORRIEDALE yarn. It didn't have a tag. It's from the Battenkill Fiber Mill, and it is definitely sort of an Aran chunky weight. And I bought it specifically to make the rug sweater. And why? Because somebody at the retreat was wearing her rug sweater, and we all pretty much just fell in love with it. So I think there are 3 or 4 of us that immediately bought yarn for that. So my idea is to make this before the retreat, which is at the end of April, and hopefully it won't get canceled, and wear this to the retreat, provided the weather is okay. Last year was very cool, so this would have been the perfect sweater. So I know what the main color of the sweater is, but I hadn't quite decided what the color work would be. Amy Beth's version, the one that inspired us all, had mostly browns, and they were all sort of like hand spun yarns, and she had used whatever she had, leftovers. So I thought I might do the same. I have this Malabrigo Chunky in this rust color that I thought could be an interesting one. And I also have this turquoise, which is color 9423 that I was using in the TELJA for my friend. And there's quite a bit of this left, so I thought this could also be. So I am at the moment just swatching on 6mm needles with the CORRIEDALE and putting a little bit of each of the other colors just to see what it looks like. So that is the turquoise, and that is the Malabrigo Chunky in the terracotta colorway. And I'm completely undecided about what I think. I might use both. I haven't decided, but I figure I've got until I finish the TELJA, I've got at least till then to make my decision. I might look a bit further as well in my yarn stash to see what I have. I wouldn't mind some brown, and maybe brown with this, some parts in brown and some parts in the terracotta. I do really like the turquoise with it as well. So I'm undecided. Let's see what happens. So this swatching has been happening over the last couple of days, little bits and bobs here. I had also tried the orange that I used in the TELJA, but there was something about the orange that I didn't like with this gray, so that I don't think will happen. And then there are a couple of little acquisitions that I thought I would share with you. First of all, last time I hadn't been able to show you the yarn by Bente of Arctic Crafts because it was in my yarn closet, which is in my daughter's bedroom. So I didn't show this to you, and I had also given it the wrong name. This is the yarn by Arctic Crafts. It is a beautiful color, stunning color. And this is the Virginia Tobacco. I think I'd called it butternut something or other. Sorry about that. It's not. It's Virginia Tobacco by Arctic Crafts. Bente has amazing yarns in her shop. I know that I was watching her podcast yesterday, and she mentioned not being able to send to the States right now. She is located in Norway. So if you happen to be elsewhere and want to order this right now, she has beautiful yarns. So I had bought this specifically thinking that this would go into a shawl with a couple of other yarns that I have. So we'll see, maybe that'll end up happening in the fall. This is a CORRIEDALE also. Sorry, my voice is going from talking so much. So these are, both of these are CORRIEDALE yarns. And this one is a CORRIEDALE nylon yarn, and it's got a nice, trustworthy feel to it. I like it a lot. Feels like it would be really good sock yarn. And then last week, I happened to see Helen, who's a friend from Ireland. She was in Canada briefly. We'll just put it that way, Helen. And she brought me some yarn from her stash from Dye Candy, which is, I believe, an Irish dyer. I didn't actually check. In this crazy aqua color. It looks really nice with this gray. That's interesting. Maybe this will end up being some sort of color work with something. I have no idea, except that when I went to Montreal to see Helen, we had dinner together, and the next morning I went to Espace Tricot. I ended up not buying anything at Espace Tricot because I was in one of those indecisive moods. But they had, of course, some amazing mohairs, and they had a really nice minty green mohair, and I thought, wouldn't that be nice to work with something, or put together with something? And it didn't occur to me at that time that it could be a neat thing to put with this. So anyway, I have no idea what this is going to become, but thank you so much, Helen. And then the other yarn that came into my life was a prize. I won a giveaway on Instagram. And we're not talking about one skein of yarn here. So Annie Parin, who is a dyer in Montreal, she actually dyes the Grace base for Espace Tricot, if you happen to follow Espace Tricot, which is, I believe, a single ply yarn. She had a giveaway on her Instagram, and I won. And what came were 7 skeins of yarn in this beautiful, I think this colorway is called Ceramique. I'm not 100% sure, but in this really stunning, so a little bit more of a taupey color than the sweater that I'm wearing. It's got a little bit more of an oatmeal-y taupiness to it, if I can say that. Or what would you call that? A fawn? Something like that. So this is a single ply merino, I'm assuming, and it came with 3 skeins of this Surrey Alpaca Mulberry Silk Blend. Hello. So I have not decided what I'm going to do with this at all, but it is a really beautiful color. I have been looking for a kind of blue. I have this blue in my head to make the Mount Pleasant sweater by Megan Nodecker, also known as Pin and Pin. Pip and Pin, sorry. And she had actually given me that pattern when we had the original Garment Galore Cal, and had also given it up as a prize. She had a collection of patterns, and in it was the Mount Pleasant. And I've been wanting to make that since then, and even before then, because I had seen it, and it's a beautiful sweater. It's a sort of a short sleeve, although you could make a long sleeve version, sort of cropped with a bit of lace here at the bottom. And I wanted to make it in a blue, but I'm just not seeing the blue that I have in my mind anywhere. Blues are either a little bit too electric, or a little bit too turquoisey, or a little bit too dull. I have this blue that is, it's not a powder blue, it's darker than a powder blue, but it's sort of like a darker version of a powder blue. And I've seen it in a yarn, but the yarn was, I think it was like either a DK or a worsted weight, and this calls for a fingering weight. But that was the color that I was looking for. And so I've sort of been thinking maybe I am limiting myself. And last night I actually thought maybe this would be very nice as a Mount Pleasant. I always struggle to take, 4 skeins and divide it up into different projects, because I think this should become a sweater. But maybe I will make myself a sort of fawn colored Mount Pleasant instead of a blue colored one. I don't know. I haven't decided. I've also considered, using this as a giveaway on our podcast. So I haven't decided at all what's going to happen with this, but this was quite the prize to win. So that is it for acquisitions. I've been asked a few times about this painting here. This is a painting by a local artist that I bought at one point with some money that was given to me that came out of the blue, and I didn't know what to do with it. And then I saw this painting and I thought, you know, that's not, I have quite a bit of art around the house, but most of it is either something that has been made by a family member, a friend, or myself. So I very, very rarely have actually bought art. So I decided to buy this painting, which, whoops, sorry. I just wanted to show you there because I've been asked a few times to see the entire painting. And when I saw it, I think the colors just were very, very peaceful colors, and I love gray, as you know. There happens to be ochre in it, and there was just something very peaceful about it that I liked, and it was kind of like a no-brainer to me. I was like, that is what I'm buying, and it's going into my living room. And it also suits my living room. There is gray and yellow in my living room, so it was like it just worked, and I do like it very much. So that's one thing. So we are living in crazy times right now with this pandemic that's going on. I hope that you are healthy and finding your way through this. This is an unprecedented event, really, when you think about it. I don't think that there's been this type of thing that has affected everybody in very much in the same way across the globe. So it's an interesting time that way, that even though there is an isolation, there's also this shared experience. And I have to say, I think, you know, I have been feeling quite, on a certain level, okay, but we have been asked to stay home. So I've been teleworking this last week. This was March break, so the kids were going to be off anyways. We had plans, all those plans got canceled. So it became a very sedentary week, and I'm not used to being at home all the time. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna have to find some ways to find balance for myself, because otherwise I will really start to be affected by this in terms of my mental health. And there are people who are real homebodies, and so they are struggling less, and we have family members who find this a lot easier than others. And I know that for me, like, I've tried to do yoga every single morning. I've also tried to make sure that I get out for a walk at some point in the day. And surprisingly, there are a lot of people out walking. I think that everybody's needing to get out of the house and walk. And so either they're walking their dogs, or you just see couples or people alone, or I've even seen small groups of people walking together and just going out. And walking around the neighborhood has been strange because there's so many of the small businesses that are closed. But I thought, okay, we need to think of things that will find balance. So the kids and I will be talking this weekend because the schools will be closed for a little while. We will be teleworking. We're somehow expected to work and manage these children at home. I mean, they're teenagers in my case, so it's not as challenging as for people who have smaller children. But I thought, I've been thinking, what do I need to do to find the balance through all this? So certainly yoga has been one thing, going out for walks. As knitters, there's a certain part of me that's like, all right, more knitting time. Not necessarily. I can't say that I'm knitting more than I normally would be. I feel like I have an obligation also to, we were spending more time in the evenings together since we're both trying to work during the day. So there's been a lot of, family time, playing games. We've been baking together. We made madeleines for the first time. I'd never made them before, and we borrowed a madeleine pan from somebody, and that was really fun, actually. And the kids have been getting more involved in making dinner, and we've watched a couple of movies together, and just we've been on some walks as well, and so just trying to get out and find also just things that we can do to enjoy our time. So it's going to be an interesting challenge, and so I think that's my biggest question for myself has been, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I'm able to remain mentally healthy? Because I've got to say, I'm not somebody who can stay home all the time. Even when in normal times, if I telework, sometimes by the end of the day, I'm getting a little antsy and a little grumpy, and I need to get out. So the idea of teleworking every day, I thought, I'm going to be an absolute horrendous mess by the end of this. So that's trying to find balance in all of this is going to be an interesting challenge. Somebody at work actually put me on to Mel Robbins. I think she has a television show, and I don't watch television, so I don't know her show, but she's doing little daily check-ins on, I think, on Facebook and on Instagram. And so I've been watching her little bits, and I've been finding her actually inspiring and making me think a little bit outside of the box, or just thinking a little bit more openly, because I find that, you know, if we start getting upset about what's going on, we can start just kind of like closing in, and it's been helping to sort of keep me looking up and out and thinking. And so she has some good thoughts on things you can do to keep yourself inspired and motivated in a time that may become quite wearing after a while. So I've found that you know, that's been helpful, because everything's just canceled, and the shops, a lot of the local shops are closed. So I've been thinking actually that I think I'm going to start buying some gift certificates from the shops that do have that online. I'm thinking that I'll go there at some point in the future, and I'm helping to support them now. I don't necessarily need anything right now, but I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen with the smaller businesses. The larger businesses have remained open, you know, the big grocery stores and the big pharmacies and the liquor store, they're still open. So, but all the little boutiques or all the little coffee shops are tending to close. So I've been thinking about what can I do to support them as well. I find that people are starting to connect. People are starting to get on Zoom or on WhatsApp or on different types of modes of connection and wanting to connect and see one another, which is great, because we need to see one another, right? So I think I've noticed a lot of podcasts popping up this last week sort of saying, hey, I'm just checking in. We're going to try and check in more often, because we do need that contact. So yeah, it's going to be interesting times. So let's see how we fare, and I do hope that that we'll fare okay, and I hope that this passes, and that you know, you're able to find some positivity in this time as well. And well, I guess that comes to the end of that. I did think about sharing some of the books that I've been reading and some of the movies that I've been watching, in case you're looking for some inspiration that way. I've seen quite a few movies over the last couple of months, and or TV show, not so much TV shows. The only TV show I've watched is Kim's Convenience on Netflix. We all became quite addicted to it, actually. Just really very funny, and it's a CBC production. And I've watched all the seasons. Actually, just realizing we didn't watch this week's episode, because we found a way on CBC Gems to watch the ones that are coming in, because the latest season is not on Netflix. But the first 3 seasons, I believe, are on Netflix, and it's a very light, sometimes politically incorrect, talks a lot, you know, actually highlights a lot of the social issues that we're dealing with, and but in a very funny way, and I really, really enjoy it. And if you want some levity, give it a try. We've also watched The Two Popes on Netflix, which was really well done, really beautiful acting on the part of the 2 main actors. And The Duchess with Keira Knightley on Netflix. I have to say, I didn't think I was going to like it. but I did. I thought it was actually really well done. It's a very good story. I think, you know, examining women's lives at a certain period of time and how challenging they could be was very well done. Last night, not last night, 2 nights ago, we watched The Irishman on Netflix as well, with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci. It was okay. I think they tried to use the technology and it was fairly successful. It was an interesting story. I didn't know very much about Jimmy Hoffa, so that was interesting. I went on to Wikipedia afterwards to read up a little bit more on him. But I didn't love the movie, to be honest. It was too long. It was 3.5 hours. But there was some good acting. It was a good story. And I'm also not really sure that Al Pacino was the best choice for that role. I kept thinking Russell Crowe should be playing this, but anyway, that's my decision, my choice, not theirs. So anyway, I think worth a watch, especially if you're interested in mafia type movies, but I wouldn't say it's the best movie out there. We also watched The Parasite, which won the best film at the Oscars this year. And that was interesting. That had us on the edge of our seats. I haven't read up on a whole bunch, but I was very curious as to why that was chosen in a way by the Oscars. But I left that as a question mark for myself. It is unpredictable and interesting, creepy. And as I said, goes in directions that you just don't expect. But it was a very well done movie. Very well done movie. Also watched Maleficent with Isla one night with, you know, about Maleficent, about the bad witch, so to speak. And that was really good. And I thought, you know, it's interesting. There are a lot of these movies that are very much about the environment. And this was yet another one, just like The Shape of Water was and Avatar was. I felt like this was another one of those movies really trying to send this message home. And the last one that I watched was Judy, about Judy Garland, which was good. I mean, it was a biopic. I think Renee Zellweger's performance was very good, but I have to say the movie left me really angry. I was really pissed off after that movie. Her life was miserable, and she made her life miserable, but her life was also just miserable, and it made me angry at Hollywood and how they destroy people's lives, people who are artists and kind of vulnerable, and she was destroyed, and that just made me angry. So much talent, and yet so much misery. So not a fun, light movie. At least it didn't leave me that way. I was really quite perturbed for a day after that. If you want absolute lightness and levity, Kim's Convenience is your choice right now. And in terms of books, I read, and one thing I want to say about books was, last time I told you guys that I had read the first book by Louise Penny in the Armand Gamache series, and I was amazed at how many of you love that series, and how many of you love Armand Gamache, and how many of you have opinions about the narrators. So that was really neat. And I've actually since, the book that I'm reading now or listening to now is the second book in the Gamache series, and I have to say I'm actually enjoying it more. I think the first one was very much about setting the context, and the second one, the fact that it's referring back to a lot of things that happened in the first book, is making it interesting, and I know the characters, and I'm enjoying it a lot more. So anyway, I was just really, I was really amazed at how many people have read these books, and I'm glad that you've all enjoyed them. I really enjoy all the references, all the Canadian references in it, actually. The references to just different things in Montreal, areas of Montreal. Like in the second book, they talk about the Barrie subway station and the Barrie bus station, which is Barrie, B-E-R-R-I. It's a name, it's not referring to food. and it's a subway station as well as where the bus terminal is in Montreal. And I know that very well because I used to take the bus to visit my father in Quebec City and had to change buses in Montreal. So that was referred to at one point in the second book, and Outremont, which is an area of Montreal, is mentioned because that's where Armand Gamache lives, which is a very bourgeois area of Montreal, very beautiful area of Montreal. Residential area, and it was just, you know, they mentioned the double doubles at Tim Hortons, and just that is really fun. I have to say I really enjoyed that. Other books that I've read recently: Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. What a gripping story. I absolutely loved it. Made me think a lot about Barbara Kingsolver, and especially some of her earlier works, and The Prodigal Summer especially. So if you happen to be a Barbara Kingsolver lover, I think you'll really enjoy the premise of this book. Towards the end, I started not losing interest at all, but I didn't love the way the story went towards the end. I found it a bit, I don't know, strange, like a little bit sappy and a little bit unbelievable. The whole story in some ways was unbelievable, but the first part of it was just amazing, and I recommend that book. And I know a lot of people have had very, very positive feelings about that book. After that, I read a book by Cherie Dimaline, I think. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce her name. She is a writer, Canadian Métis writer, who has become very well known for her first book, well, at least her first well-known book. I'm not sure if it's her first book, called The Marrow Thieves, which is a dystopian teen novel set in an indigenous kind of setting. And I actually wanted to read that one, but Audible didn't have it. And I do think that I'll be able to get it through the library, though. They're downloadable books at some point, and I would like to read it because it's been very, very celebrated, and it seems to be very good. Everybody who's read it has really enjoyed it. But because they didn't have that on Audible, I decided to read her second book, which is more geared towards adults, but there's still a little bit of a fantastical dystopian, not so much dystopian, but slightly dystopian, but fantastical element to it, because it is sort of dealing with some of the mythical creatures used in indigenous culture and Métis culture anyway, to scare children from doing silly things. And but it is more of an adult book, and I really liked it, actually. There were moments in the book that I thought, do I like this? I'm not 100% sure I like it, but actually I did. And I really, I think that I kind of feel like there's still more to come with this writer. There's going to be a continued development, but there's really interesting elements to her books, and I loved the dialogue in the book, actually, and the reader was fabulous. She really captured the kind of like the style of talking and the dialogue. She really did a fabulous job. So that was an interesting book. There's a bit of a darkness to it, so you have to be prepared for that. There is a little bit of that element to it. And then the last book I read after that was Little Women, completely different, by Louise May Alcott. And I read it because I really want to see the movie. I really want to see Little Women with Saoirse Ronan, because I really enjoy her acting a lot. But I thought, oh, I should read the book first. It's such a classic. The movie's been made multiple times. I gotta say, I didn't like the book very much. It was just a little too sappy for me. I really struggled with some of the, like, just the characters, the dialogue just seemed, I'm like, do people really talk like that? Like, do people really talk like that? There were moments where I thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong with us? Why aren't we kind enough today? Why aren't we, you know, maybe we're not engaged enough? And then there were times I'm like, do people really talk like that? So I don't know, there was a lot about it that I struggled with, the characters. And I know that there are parts of it that are really from its time, and I actually liked the idea of, there was sort of a bit of a didactic aspect to it, of values, teaching values, and I didn't mind that part of it. I just didn't like the way it was presented very much. But I'm glad I read it, and I'm looking forward to seeing the movie with Saoirse Ronan. It's actually just come onto Netflix, and it'll be rentable in early April. So I'm looking forward to seeing that because I just love her work. I love her acting a lot. So looking forward to seeing that. And that's pretty much what I've read. I've read quite a bit. I'm in the process of reading Fatal Grace. I'm not 100% sure what's going to come next. I've got a couple of classics that I want to continue reading, and that was another reason for reading Little Women, that it was a classic, so I wanted to read it. I want to reread The Great Gatsby. I read that in high school and I remember loving it. I think it was one of the first books where it just opened my eyes to the symbolism that can be in books, and I'd like to read it again, see how I feel about it. I also want to read Jamaica Inn by Rebecca du Maurier, and I'm also looking at what else I want to read. There is it called The Land of a Thousand Suns or 10,000 Suns by Khaled Khomeini. He had written The Kite Runner and then came up with this other book. I have that on my phone waiting to be listened to as well. So we'll see what I get up to next. But that's the reading that I've done so far. So I think that's enough for today. I always feel like I'm just babbling and hoping that it'll make some sense by the end of it. Anyway, I do hope that this episode finds you well and safe and healthy and taking care of yourself and those around you. And we will see you next time. I don't know when that'll be, but it'll be sometime in the near future. And I decided that I would leave you today with some images of some of the free patterns that I have favorited over time that I think are really great. So, you know, if you are looking for some patterns and not in a position to spend money on patterns or trying hard not to, there are some amazing free patterns out there. So I just thought I'd leave you with an image or some images of some of those, as well as some more of the music by Barefoot McCoy called I Love You Only. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
All the stars have come in close just to see you, I suppose, and they're a-gleaming. You must be dreaming, and the sun has said goodbye with a twinkle in his eye. He's left the ocean with sweet emotion. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly. And the moon is looking down on the sleepy side of town, and he's so lonely. I love you only. I love you only. All the birds have taken flight. It's their favorite time of night when they can hear you from somewhere near you, and the palm trees try to bend to be closer to their friends. They're made of magic. Reach out and grab it. We go dancing in the rain, riding on a midnight train, away so slowly. And the moon is looking down on the sleepy side